Hey guys, welcome back to Unscriptd Podcast. My name's Will. As you can see right here, if you're not familiar with the show, I'm one of the co-hosts. I wanted to do a solo episode today, an origin story of the podcast, what I've learned in building a podcast from ground up, how the Lord's been guiding me on this. This could be worthwhile for someone else who might be thinking about creating a show, or you're at that point where you're 40, 50, 60 episodes in and you're like, man, what am I doing here? Maybe this is a good episode for you. So I'm going to dive right in. Question 1, why did I start the podcast in the first place? This is unique for those who are day one. You kind of understand the origin story of Unscriptd. It used to be the Days In podcast. I know a mouthful to say. Short was TDEP. If you saw TDEP floating around out there, the Days In podcast came about. I was it was maybe 2019, early 2020, getting close to 2020. And I was in the oil field still. And that's kind of where I got my background in safety. And in my tenure that I currently have is in the oil field is where I got my unique start. And I won't go down that rabbit hole, but I found myself in West Texas without my wife. We're like freshly married on our second year. She's up in the Metroplex, which is in an area she had never been in before. I'm back down in my old stomping grounds of West Texas. And I'm just trying to figure out who the heck I am. Trying to figure out what I'm doing. I'm traveling 10 days at a time to go to work, and I have only 4 days off. And a part of those 4 days off were travel to and from. And so it was really taxing, I think, just on me mentally as a man. And obviously we want to provide for our wives and for our people, whether you're, a woman and you're providing for your man or vice versa. We want to contribute to each other in marriage. And the one thing we weren't able to contribute was, time with each other. And so I was having a hard time with this to sum it up. And I remember sitting on a balcony in West Texas, which was a provided apartment by our company. And I was sitting there, and I'm going to say it out loud. I was chain smoking cigarettes at the time. If you're in the oil field, you understand how it is. A nasty habit. If you do smoke cigarettes, it is what it is. But the whole point is I'm sitting there chain smoking cigarettes. That's not me. Former athlete, 20 years of basketball. I did it for the social environment, but I'm sitting there experiencing this by myself. That's the irony of it is I started smoking for a social environment, yet here I am by myself in an area that I feel like my people aren't in, my wife, the most important person to me. And I'm just trying to figure out who I am. And so I'm sitting there, I'm thinking I'm like extremely depressed, and I didn't really have the words at the time to give it that, to know what that was. I'd never really dealt with depression before. If you know me or you kind of watch the show a little bit, I'm a very determined person. And my mindset is if there's a challenge in front of me that I'm going to overcome it some way, some shape, somehow. I'm going to figure it out. And so the solution for me in most cases is not, oh, well, here it is. This is my experience. It's okay. What am I going to do to transform this and have a different experience? And I'm sitting there, I'm experiencing depression for the first time, trying to figure out how I can get home, what I'm going to have to do to get back home, how I can get out of this environment. And then I felt like the Lord, the Holy Spirit on my heart, very like audibly, I could hear it. It said to speak. I want you to speak. I remember sitting there thinking to myself, like, what? Speak? Like, speak about what? Like who? And it was like, I want you to speak. It didn't give me any other context outside of that. I just want you to speak. You need to speak. I remember sitting there resonating on that for a couple of days, maybe even a couple of weeks. And it almost had like rooted into me, right? It rooted deep into me to where it would come up randomly throughout the course of like my days and my weeks and months moving forward. And inevitably, I ended up getting furloughed in the oil field because of 2020 and the whole COVID situation. We won't go down that rabbit hole, but I ended up getting furloughed from the oil field and then picked up at where I currently am now. And so obviously things have transformed, but ever since then I had been running, right? So it's 2026 now. So, 2019, and then we go into 2020, I get furloughed. Now I'm with this new company. Now I'm experiencing something new. Now I'm back home with my wife, which is exactly what I wanted. But even still, now that I've gotten what I wanted, I still had this experience or this voice in the back of my mind that was like, speak, you need to speak. And so I've got friends, one of the good ones that helped me start or kind of came on board when I started the Days In podcast was Cody, reluctantly. And we used to have conversations in the car all the time. We both work really hard. He'd call me, I'd call him. We talk about these things. I'm like, man, we got to do something. We got to start a podcast or something. We had no idea how to do this. And so I ended up starting it finally with another older friend. And the three of us came together for this disheveled experience of starting a podcast, audio only. And I remember I was working for my current company now, and just before we had started, and I was running away from this experience. And I was like, well, podcasts, yeah, but how am I going to have the time to do this? How am I going to have the resources to do this? Don't you need super fancy cameras? Don't you need all this different stuff? And I remember that I was having a conversation with, believe it or not, Cody's grandmother. Mimi is what we called her, a very amazing woman of faith and such a disciple out there for the Lord. And I remember she told me, she was like, you're being selfish for keeping your poetry, for keeping like your spoken word, for keeping just these conversations away from people that might want to hear them. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, well, people don't want to hear what I have to say, right? And she was like, no, you're being selfish. She was like, you need to get out there and do. And she had no idea what a podcast was at the time, but she was like, you need to get out there and you need to create and I was like, are you talking about a podcast? She was like, that's it. And I was like, there's no way. And so that next day, just to kind of piece these pieces together in a weird order. But that next day, basically, I was like, okay, I told my wife, I was like, I'm committed, because I had been running from the Lord on this thing for like 3 years at this point, maybe 4 years. And every time that I'd move away from what he was wanting me to say, that you need to speak, and then it coming to that fruition of that conversation with Mimi, I felt like it was starting to get to where he was removing other things in my life that were a distraction from me actually starting this. So to sum up a long story short, that's kind of how this podcast started. And we started as a Days In podcast. We went through an entire season of almost 25 episodes of audio only. Us just ranting and raving and laughing and failing. So 25 episodes that aired, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, but also 25 episodes that never aired because we just ruined it, whether the audio was terrible or somebody just was off kilter. Their mind wasn't in it. And so we had a very unique start and a very, I guess, rags to riches, even though we're still kind of in the trenches here, start for the podcast. So just to give you a little bit of backstory into our history and where we are today. Obviously, we progressed forward into season 2. We took a little bit of a hiatus, and then we brought on board Michael Greer, which today in Unscriptd Podcast. So it was me, Michael, and Cody. We ended up doing actual video for the first time, just using, I think, just webcams. And so that was an entire experience. We got some guests on for the first time. We really went down that rabbit hole of it's going to take a guest every single episode for this to be an important conversation. It's going to take a guest every single episode for us to get to the reach that we want it to be at, to monetize, to all these blah, 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 all these different things. And inevitably, Cody kind of fell off because this is a taxing experience, and he was experiencing some different kind of life things that were going on, and we're both getting older. We both have kids. And so he kind of fell off a little bit and gave us a nudge forward, myself and Michael, and big blessing and prayer. And Michael and I kind of took over some conversations, and inevitably ended up rebranding and becoming Unscriptd and what it is today. So just a little bit about the background, just a little bit about some of the struggles that we've faced. And obviously I wanted to paint a picture of what the core root of this podcast is about. And it's about that moment on that balcony, hearing the Lord speak to me and say audibly that I can hear in my spirit, you need to speak. And so I am who I am and what I am. And so is a podcast today because of that. So question 2, what was I doing before and what made me want more? Obviously, the background of the oil field, but I've always kind of thought of myself as a creative, whether that's behind the camera, in front of the camera. I do a lot of fitness. I've done a lot of fitness, like reels and stuff like that on TikTok, and fitness is a big part of my athletic background and that sort of thing. And so I've been in safety for a while, 14 years, honestly, in operations of different kind. And so I've worked as a career man, 9 to 5. And I enjoy that. I enjoy being around people, and I got a very unique perspective in business from ground up. I mean, literally from the ground up. And I wouldn't have had it any other way. But I've always thought of myself as a creative, and that not necessarily that I could do more or want more. I think that I really, and I didn't have the words to describe it then. I've always wanted that purpose, that purposeful feeling when you're doing something, even if it's challenging, that at the end of it, you knew you were doing the right thing. It made sense because you're doing exactly what God has you doing, right? And I had several moments like that early on in my career where I thought, this is it. These are challenging circumstances. This is, obviously this has taken a lot out of me. Maybe I don't know something, and so I'm going to go learn something new, etc. I'm having all these experiences, and I'm thinking to myself, on the end of it, it's going to be that fulfilling reward or that fulfilling experience. And then it wasn't. And so that was my early career of grinding with no reward, with nothing on the other end of it to show for it other than I had said yes to some decisions, right? And so I think that's what kind of led to that depression inevitably is, I'm trying to figure out how all of what I've learned and all of what I've experienced like matters today. And it just seemed like I couldn't find that. And so just give a little bit about the background. That's kind of where I started. And what I wanted more of was I'm a camaraderie driven person. I'm a community driven person. So podcasting for me is perfect, right? If you have a story, origin from a guest to the people that I know, and inevitably that's what it became is Michael and I having conversations about, well, why do we need a guest? Why do we need a guest to come on the show to make this popular? Why does this even need to be popular? First and foremost, like we should be having the right types of conversations. And that's what I would encourage anybody who's starting a podcast is, what are you doing it for? If it's for the guests and for the popularity, great, go for that. Like there's such an algorithm and such a pipeline for that. But if like you're going to figure out who you are through conversations or if you're trying to recreate those conversations that give you life, I encourage you to stick with that no matter the popularity or no matter the views or follows or whatever the case is, like stay true to what your origin is, because it's very painful to wake up one day and go, what crap? Like I'm not doing any of like what I actually set out to do. So hopefully that answers that question. Question 3, was there a specific moment or did it build slowly? I feel like I kind of already answered that. What did I think this show was going to be? I had no idea. I kind of still don't know. And I love that because if you know me, the more I know or think I know about what something's going to be, the more I get my hands in it. And then inevitably, not that I am not a capable individual and I don't have skill sets that help something progress well. I do things very well, I think, and I have a lot of confidence in myself. At the same time, I'm also confident enough to tell you and transparent enough to tell you that like the more I get my hands involved in things and I start to try to take control over from what God's actually doing, the quicker it messes up and it becomes disheveled and like not what exactly it was supposed to be in the beginning. So I still don't know where the show's going. I do know that we're the most aligned that we've ever been, which I love. That's like the best thing for me, most important thing for me. If I wake up in the middle of the night and I snap awake and like have this vision on my mind of like this being surgically removed from me because I'm putting all my eggs in one basket. I've experienced that before. The Lord took my passion for basketball completely away. That's another backstory I'll tell you guys later. And yeah, I've experienced that and I don't want to experience that with this podcast because I just know how much value it has. And so I always want it to be aligned with what it started as, which is I need to speak, I need to sit back and listen as well. And I need to be truthful about what I'm aiming to get out of this, which first and foremost, I always told someone or everyone that if this podcast changed one life, like it was worth it. Well, it has mine. So again, if you're starting a podcast, you're starting anything, content creation, look at yourself first. Is it changing something in you? And I'm a completely different person. I can tell you after starting this show, when it comes to like my 9 to 5, I can talk to anybody. I'll go up to anybody and have a conversation. I used to be a very shy individual and now I can blabber on, but I don't just blabber on just randomly. Now it's just very positioned. And now I have this ability that I would have only been able to pull out of myself had I been in seminars or, of course, in front of the camera for this podcast. So I have this ability now to draw out of people a conversation. You can walk up to somebody and start some sort of surface level conversation, but now I can really draw the inner thoughts and the inner workings of a person out, which is, I kind of think, a beautiful thing because we are very reserved and protected and guarded and that sort of thing. And so that's a unique skill set that I've been able to acquire from podcasting. So question 5, where does the name Unscripted come from? Believe it or not, when we were talking about rebranding, Michael and I, we spent a lot of time in the gym partners, and we were in the sauna, and we were just kind of talking about the show. We were talking about how hard it was for people to say the Days In Podcast. They'd be like, what's it called? I'm like, the Days In Podcast. They're like, Days In. I'm like, no, the Days In Podcast. It was just becoming like a challenging experience just to communicate what the heck the show was called. And so I love that. I love that it started there, but we went, okay, maybe this is a little confusing. Let's help people out. But then also we wanted to kind of get to the root of like who we were. And so that's a key word, rooted. We thought about and juggled around the Rooted podcast or I think it was Rooted. Yeah, Rooted podcast for a while. It was taken and it was just too much complexity there. Not only that, but just on my spirit, it didn't feel right. And, we got a little backlash from a lot of different day ones and different other supporters and stuff like that about changing it from the Days In Podcast. But inevitably I had to listen to where my heart was going and that and what the Holy Spirit was saying and inside of my heart in regards to this. And so Michael and I are going between gyms and we're kind of debating this and we're praying about it. We're even kind of having a little bit of a tiff about it, and inevitably it came down and I sent him, I was like, hey man, like unscripted. Because I mean, that's what we were doing. We were talking to guests and we had this whole script for the guest. We'd send them show notes. And guess what? We never even talked about any of those show notes. We might talk about like one entry level thing, maybe a topic at the glance of an eye. But for the most part, we were just engaged in this conversation. Like I said, we've learned how to draw that out of people. And I think, guests and origins, start or story individuals and different business individuals, that's just kind of the conversations that I think they seek anyways, is, just having a conversation generally with somebody outside of like that scripted sales and pitch and slide deck like environment. I think that's kind of what gets people going nowadays, because everything feels very, very set, right? Very like it's on purpose this way, and there's not anything organic. And so we were having organic conversations that were unscripted, and it just kind of came to mind. I was like, oh, I'll just name ourselves Unscripted. He was like, I love that, and we prayed about it in a gym parking lot, and next thing we knew, we were rebranding it, and here we are. Question 6. Did I feel qualified to do this? I'm not laughing at me. I'm laughing with me, because still to this day, a lot of times I don't. Podcasting is such a unique space to be in, because there's so many people doing it, but that's not like that's not a worrisome thing, right? That's so many people do it because they see the value in it. And so do I. My problem is not whether or not I think that I'm qualified to do this. I think my problem is I compare. I do a lot of comparison. We should be the next Sean Ryan show, or we should be the next, Diary of a CEO. And that's just not going to happen. Like not overnight, and not without having paved our own lane and become our own person, I think, our own show. And I think that the more you realize that when you're creating anything, the better. You can pull bits and pieces, because that's what we've been doing throughout history anyways. But to directly mirror another person's success, specifically whether they believe it or not, God's like trajectory for them, you're not able to mirror that, and it just doesn't fit. It's like putting a circle peg in a square hole. Like it's just awkward. It's rough, and it's tiring and exhausting. Like it's just not going to work. And so I don't think it's about whether or not I feel qualified. I'm becoming qualified 80 plus episodes in, almost even maybe 100 episodes in, realistically, for those that never made it. But I think what's dying off is that comparison imposter syndrome, that I should be somewhere, or that we should be somewhere that we're not either meant to be right now, or we're just not capable of being right now. And that's okay. Like that's healthy for us to be in that space to recognize that. All right, moving into another segment. Question 7. What did I completely underestimate? I'd say consistency, not taking into account the many curveballs that life throws you. And then you're like approaching launch day on Thursday morning, you don't have a thumbnail, you don't have your episode back, or you don't have an episode at all, and you're sitting there. And when I say that, for me at least, maybe I'm a perfectionist, but for me at least, it's like the walls are like caving in and shaking on you, because you're like, oh my gosh, the algorithm. Like consistency is so important, and everyone online is telling you about how consistency is so important. Absolutely, it is. Consistently being yourself for yourself. Be true to yourself. Be true to the show. Be true to whatever you're creating, ensure that you're even mentally stable to be able to have that conversation. What's the point of being consistent if like your quality of like what you're putting out sucks? I think that there's so many different determinations on that, which is, well, even if the quality sucks, you should be trying to flood the internet with as much as you can possibly put out there. That's not our game plan. Our game plan is, in fact, and we did it behind the scenes, and you guys probably either noticed or didn't notice, but we went from releasing 4 days or 4 times a month to only releasing twice. And the crazy part is when we backed off and did only twice a month, our viewership started to climb way faster than it has for the last several years. Whether with the high guests or whatever else, we were like plateaued at a point, and we haven't even like perfected SEO and all that kind of stuff. Like that's, to me, rocket science, right? So, but we backed off, and we had a discussion, Michael and I, and we were like, well, if we're gonna push this thing and it's gonna be like what it originally was supposed to be, then it can't be about like us struggling to get as much content out there as we possibly can, and then like torturing ourselves when we can't uphold that consistency. Like we really just need to focus in on how many we can record, and if those are going to be good conversations. And hopefully you've noticed that for like the last maybe month or so, is we have focused in on the conversations being good conversations, whether it's myself and my wife, myself and Michael, we just take our time. We're slow paced. We try to keep it at a good minute, right? Like maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes tops. But like we really try to stay on one topic. We try not to cram so much stuff in there because we're so excited to just talk to each other. But that's the thing. We want to bring that excitement to talk to each other. We want to understand that we have a story to tell just as important as any guest that's going to come on the show. First and foremost, why does a guest want to come on your show unless you have 1 million followers and a bunch of platform for them to promote their thing? Why would they even want to come on your show if you don't have a story? You know, and I've said that a lot. And so that was deep on my heart. And what I underestimated was how difficult it is to maintain, 4 to 6 episode per week. And for those podcasts that are doing it, even if you're not the host or not like posting and they've got an entire system, kudos to you guys, because that's a difficult thing to uphold. Question 8, what did I waste time or money on that didn't matter? This one hurts. This one hurts a little bit. I spent a lot of time, I'll go between both. I spent a lot of time perfecting this thing. Okay, the audio has to be like the crispiest that it could possibly be. I've got to find every platform or every tool that's going to allow me to do that. We got to like spend X amount of money for like an engineer to be able to do this. Just be audible. Invest in a good mic. This is an MV7, the old MV7. I've got another mic back behind me to my left, which is my SM7B. I want a million other things. I'm a tech addict, I guess. And so I got to pace myself, especially for my wife and for my family, but just get something. Shop on Facebook Marketplace. Everyone's selling something, right? Grab a mic, grab a DJI mic. I don't have them in front of me. Grab something and make sure it's crisp, make sure you're in a good spot. But I wasted way too much time trying to make sure that the audio was correct. And then I wasted too much time thinking that I needed a Hasselblad camera to record an episode. It's just realistically not what you need. You don't need a $12,000 camera. You could use an iPhone or I've got an Android, which is so much better than iPhone. Prove me wrong, Michael. I don't care what you say. But specifically, what I'm trying to get at is light yourself, right? Make sure that you can be heard. Make sure you don't have a bunch of wind and that sort of thing or noises that are kind of in the background. But I wasted way too much time expecting this show to be perfect, to expecting to have the best equipment. I've got a small light here, you know what I mean? Like I don't have a whole bunch of stuff, but I do have stuff. And it's so cool to kind of see that come together. But I wasted way too much money and way too much time trying to make sure that the show is perfect. And then you get to that point and you release it and then nobody watches it and you're like, that's not what it's about, right? Question 9, what surprised me about putting myself out there? I don't know if I have much to this one. I have always put myself out there. To be honest, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'll let you know my entire background, my entire life story, just off of the bat of meeting each other. It's something I find important. I like to trust. Obviously, I have intuition, but I like to trust that people are good. But they really quickly kind of tell you otherwise or show you otherwise, which it is what it is. But that's kind of the environment that we are in. And so I don't think that there was anything about how I put myself out there. I think I needed to be cognizant of the type of career that I work and what putting too much out there could mean. And so obviously you guys know I'm very liability sensitive to kind of the types of notes that I put out there or types of quotes or whatever else that I put out there, because at the end of the day, I'm a safety professional. And so I've got to make sure that aligns. And that's not me not being truthful. That's just me deciding not to talk about certain aspects of my career or my day to day and that sort of thing, just out of the respect for those areas that I need to be sensitive about. So that's about the only thing is my mind's constantly thinking about, okay, got to make sure that we're to some extent filtered, right? Question 10, what did I assume would be easy that was hard? Editing. I love you and I hate you at the same time. The amount of time that I've spent editing just to figure out that I could have done it 5 times or 10 times quicker using this tool, because I just didn't know. Like I've walked through this entire experience not knowing anything until I know it. And I actually love that, because then you get the fabric of like learning what this is and learning how to create a show. I'd love to encourage those who are creating their first show to go like, hey, search out the tools. Like there's so many available tools and incredible tools out there. At the same time, be okay like being patient in the waiting. I don't mean like waiting, like you're waiting for something, but like wading through the water, like wade through this experience and teach yourself. Self-teach yourself as much as you possibly can. AI is incredible now too. If you could self-teach yourself AI and automation, obviously that's a big thing for our podcast and our types of lives that we have on the back side. In order for us to get more time there in the areas that's actually important, we need to figure out how to optimize what we're doing here and automate it. And so I think editing was just such a challenging experience for me, especially since I I don't know. I just never had a background in it. Question 11. What did I think would be hard that didn't matter? What did I think would be hard that didn't matter? Having a guest on and knowing how to ask some questions, especially organically, in a field that you've never been in. We've had incredible guests on like Frank Cottle with Alliance Virtual Offices. I've never worked for an Alliance Virtual Office or any type of virtual office. This guy's a very well-known, very rich and saturated with career experience individual. And I'm thinking to myself, like, how am I going to engage this guy to want to talk on our episode and our podcast? And obviously we talked about his origin story. Do you know what? Off the rip, when we jumped into the episode, what he told us was, he's like, guys, I don't really want to talk about where I come from. I want to talk about where I'm going. You know who knows where he's going better than anybody else? He does. So I'm thinking they're sweating the night before, like pulling at my neck, like, how am I going to engage this guy and keep him going for this episode? And we were supposed to do an hour-long episode. It ended up being almost 2.5 hours because we started opening up about like him surfing and his family heritage and different stuff. So obviously we've done research and stuff like that, but really that was one of the pivotal episodes that showed us that like, hey, could really be an unscripted podcast or unscripted show, because it just organically flowed between myself and Michael, and and I have kind of generated this ability to feed on us. Michael's very technical. I think I'm probably a little bit more emotionally driven, right? And kind of draw out those like warm moments, and Michael can really draw out like the linguistic side of things, the language of certain, backgrounds and different aspects like that, right? He's just very technical, but he can be, we're a mix of both, but we definitely have our own lane. And so that was something I think, I thought would be hard, was trying to engage our guests to keep that show and that wheel turning. And then it became like a really easy thing. And really, honestly, everything I was trying to do, polish myself up, sit tall, talk a certain way, be punctual, all this different stuff, actually didn't matter. What mattered was looking at each other and like having a conversation, even virtually, like we were right in front of each other. Question 12, how did doing this while working full-time actually feel? Man, I could answer that two ways. Some days it's a burden because I do a lot on the back end side of like my actual career. And the last thing I want to do at the end of that is have something else to do. And so when I say work after work is a real thing, many of you already know this, it's absolutely a real thing. Work after work, and that's not your family. Your family's not work, right? But like, I'm stealing away from that time with my family. It should pay off and should be for something important. And I spent a lot of time away from probably my family and here editing until 11, maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, and then coming to my wife later in bed and that sort of thing. And like, I'm just not doing that anymore, And so in a lot of ways, doing this or doing anything hobby wise after work can be troublesome. But then at the same time, like in the same light, it's actually like such a big relief and release as well, because throughout your day for working for someone else, you're doing things towards someone else's dream. And then at the end of the day, when you can break away for your own hobby, your own self-driven business or creative idea or whatever the case is, like that's for you, and whatever you deem the community around that to be important, like that's for them as well, right? And so I think it can both be a burden in some lights and some days, and then in others it can be just kind of a refuge, which is nice. All right, moving on to segment 3, what I know now. Question 13, what do I know now that I wish someone told me at episode 1? Again, don't lose your story in this. Don't lose who you are and why you're doing this. I love to go back to this story because I think it's important. And many don't know this story, but the creator of Tinder, which I don't agree with, but the creator of Tinder, when he was creating Tinder, was not originally supposed to be what it is today. It was actually supposed to be a misconnection app. And it quickly did not become that. Obviously, he had counsel around him and other board members and other investors and that sort of thing, and it became Tinder what it is today. But I've always thought to myself, if I could ask that guy, right? I'm not sure what his name is, pardon me for not knowing that, but if I could ask him like, hey, you've had such a wild amount of success, but didn't accomplish exactly what you set out to do, because Tinder doesn't grab your misconnections or any misconnections. It's just a place for you to find somebody to chat to and hopefully like, build a relationship or whatever the case is, right? But does that bug you? Is that like a scratch or like an itch on the back of the neck that's like constantly there of like you never accomplished what you actually set out to do? And that like resonates in me every single day, every single episode, every single conversation. Is at the end of the day, if I'm just pushing this to be popular, if I'm just pushing this to monetize, if I'm just pushing this to have the next viral reel or, the most amount of content flooding the internet. Is that like what this thing started as? And for me, the answer is no. So for me, that's a really easy thing to answer. And I wish that somebody, which the Lord was, of course, but I wish that somebody really was there at the beginning to go, hey, listen, like this started as you being asked to speak. All the extra context that's been piled on top of it, that's you. You put that there. And so I wish that somebody would have told me, hey, I get back in the word, digest, and like ask the Lord like what he means by that, by this podcast that's come about, and what he's trying to get out of the podcast after the fact, instead of me starting to, hey, well, because he told me to speak, then I should be doing this, and I should be doing this, and I should be doing this. And all those things piled up and became like a body. And then I'm looking at it, I'm like, what the heck is this? Right. And so it wasn't me. It didn't give me purpose. Didn't fill me with passion. Didn't fill me with what's the word for that? With fulfilledness, right? Like, and so now that we've stripped that back, and I remember my wife told me, one night she was like, I was kind of upset about it. I was like, kind of teetering on the verge of maybe not being a part of the show anymore. I'm like, maybe I should just focus on something else. She goes, well, I want to encourage you to do something. She's like, why don't you stop looking around you and start looking up and looking at the Lord and seeking the Lord? Because as far as I'm concerned, he's the one who asked you to do this. No one else. You didn't ask anybody else around you to do this. Obviously he just brought them into your path in certain aspects, and some things you made decisions in yourself. So my wife, luckily, and it wasn't a day one, but she's been such a vital part of this thing and supporter. Many of the pieces of gear that you see is her investment in me. And when I say that is either she surprised me with something, or she supported me when I wanted to make these purchases and different stuff like that. And so I'm fortunate enough to have her and have had that conversation later. I do wish I would have had something like that earlier. Question 14, what actually matters versus what I thought mattered? Seems repetitive. I'm going to move forward. Question 15, how has my why changed since I started? I don't know if I would say it's a why. I don't think my why has started. I think it's a who. Like, who have I become? And who I've become, like what does that story look like? And what is that, like what future is that person heading into, And for Michael and I, we've had a pretty deep conversation here recently, and I think the Holy Spirit was speaking, in both of our hearts at the time, and then we met in the middle, which was just a beautiful thing. And if you've ever experienced that, it just is a confirmation that you need. And I think we just like kind of both agreed that we're done chasing how did you build a $500 million company, or, you've gotten all these rewards and like chasing all these guests that like we could just bring on board and just talk about cool things about, which is kind of how we started. It's like, we just wanted to talk about and have like a cool thing. And both of us have realized at this day, in this point of our lives and our age, that if the conversations aren't leading us back to the Lord, we don't want to have them. It's if your origin story is just one that's about building something, but that's all it did. It didn't build you. If you don't have a testimony attached to like what you're building, for us, those conversations kind of feel dead. They feel inadequate to like what we're trying to even communicate here, which is how blessed we are and how fortunate we are to be in this space, to have this opportunity to praise and worship openly and, work and provide and communicate and share and fail and succeed and all these different things in front of you guys. That's what we find important nowadays. So I don't know if it's a why, but it's more about the who. Like who are we trying to be, and what are we trying to say has changed significantly. And that's not to say that the people that we've had on prior are not incredible people, incredible stories. We've built like some really good relationships with those individuals. But us personally, if that conversation or the conversations moving forward are not encouraging me to be a better follower of Christ, or encouraging me to understand the word differently and better in ways that I didn't before, to me, I just feel unfulfilled. So question 16, what has this show taught me about myself? It has taught me that I apparently am a perfectionist, a pretty critical perfectionist. I'm talking lost friendships because of it. Look at what I'm doing and you're not doing. My expectations for myself are so high. They're so high and so direct. And I don't live outside of the black and white. I am not a gray individual at all. So we're either doing it or we're not doing it. Like there's no like, hey, I understand you had other things. Like we are either doing it or not doing it. And so it has taught me that I am a very analytical, direct, super high standard, super high expectation. And also that I put all of that on everyone else that I am usually around. And so it's been a very humiliating. And what I mean by that is it's created a lot of humility in me to look in the mirror and go, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. But if somebody's out there telling you that you shouldn't change, you need to run away from that person, because there's always an opportunity for us to change and maneuver and adapt to the environment around us. That doesn't mean you lose your core value and or who you are structurally as a person. That just means if I'm putting those expectations that I have for myself, which I'm really critical about, and that those probably actually hurt me a whole bunch more than it hurts anybody else. But even still, if I put all that weight and all that pressure on someone else, it's not their fault if they don't uphold it. And I had to have that honest conversation and change some things around. And it led to some apologies and led to some different types of conversations, And so now I can kind of step back and go, okay, listen, I'm going to take my hands out of this. I'm going to take my hands out of it. Obviously I want to give you guys a good show. And so we'll be able to do that. And that's from a director standpoint. We're going to make sure that everyone's got the education and has the understanding of like what we need to provide here every episode and every show, right? Versus just expecting somebody to be understand it the same way or be passionate about it the same way you are. And you never had those conversations. And then you in the episode and you're like, what was that? Right. So if that answered that question. Question 17, what has it taught me about my faith and calling? It has taught me very quickly. It has taught me that if you have a calling on your heart and the Lord's put a calling on your heart to do anything, mend that relationship, forgiveness, change careers, whatever the circumstance are, two things. One, faith, taking a leap of faith doesn't mean you see what's in front of you, right? Like that's how I am. Like I said, that one of the past episodes is for me, in my mind, even though I'm going to step out in faith, I need to see all the tiles in front of me. Like that's not a leap of faith, right? Trusting the Lord is different than saying, I believe in the Lord. Trusting the Lord is really truly understanding that he has your best interests at heart and that the way and method in which he's bringing it about has nothing to do with what you fabricated in your mind. And it is so much better than what you could have anticipated it to be, right? And then number two, when it gives you something on your heart, like I said, that forgiveness, to seek out a relationship or career or whatever, the change, whatever the case is, when he puts it on your heart and he speaks to you and you hear that through the Holy Spirit, and it is usually pretty vague, at least in my experience, that, hey, I need you to speak. Be very careful about what you're adding on additionally to that. Because it's like Legos, right? You're stacking Legos. So I want you to speak. And I went, oh, speak to these types of people and speak to these types of people and get these types of people on the episode and get these types of people and like have these types of conversations. Like that's me. Now it's me adding to what was the Lord's, right? Instead of me going, okay, what's the next step? Okay, I'll speak. I started this thing. And then who should I talk to? And him giving me those building blocks, those Tetris, right? Of layers. And unfortunately, I didn't do that well, and I'm doing that now, which I have to backtrack, which I kind of have a walrus mentality. A lot of you don't know this, walruses will not go backwards to the point where they'll kind of force themselves off an edge. They'll force themselves off an edge if they absolutely have to. And so I don't want to be a walrus. I don't want to have a walrus mentality of not being prepared to be patient and stop and go backwards in order to go forwards and down the path that I actually am on. But I would encourage you, if you have something on your heart that God's put in there, don't adulterate it. Don't make it and mold it and twist it into like something that actually serves you versus you serving him, right? And the whole point of why it started to begin with. Question 18, how do I balance this with being a husband and father? Beautiful moments. Beautiful moments. I've been able to get my wife on the show, which has just been such a joy. She's got such a radio presence voice. And so honestly, I'm just waiting for her to take over the podcast and then make it something popular and I can go and live my life. I'm just playing. Incorporation. It is just as important. It is just as important that she's supporting what I'm doing, that I'm turning around and supporting what she's doing. She's very creative. And my boy just loves to have fun. So he comes in and every single time I podcast, if you see it right there, back there, he comes in and he messes that whole thing up. I'm okay with it. All the little different things are all over the place. And hopefully this mic is working right now. You know what I mean? So I let him in my office. This studio looks presentable now, but if you could see to the sides, I've got toys everywhere and all different types of stuff because I want my environment to be his environment too, if it applies. And I want him to feel just as creative as I feel creative. And I want to support him that way. Just like I want to support my wife that way, and just my family in general. And when my daughter's old enough, I'll support her that way. And so it's really taught me the balance of inclusion I have my thing, and there's been many a times that my wife will take the kids or take Waylon, and she would drive and go off for an hour so I could podcast in quiet. And I appreciate her for doing that. But now I'm like, if there's kids yelling in the background, it is what it is. You know what I mean? I want my people here. I don't want to miss these moments. And so I'm very particular to, if it's not a good day for it, it's not happening. First and foremost, it's my family first. And if that means that we miss a week and the algorithm hates it. I don't care. Because my wife and I, our relationship is the most important thing. And then my kids after that. And before all of that is our relationship with the Lord. So question 19, what keeps me going on the weeks I don't feel like it? Had plenty of these. On the weeks that I don't feel like it, for me, particularly wanting to have good conversations with those that I care about, and even new people that I meet and starting to care about them. The weeks that I don't feel like it, that I've been pressurized and the job has been tough or exhausted and I've not gotten any sleep or whatever the case is. On those weeks particularly, what I remind myself is the conversations should fill me up. And if I feel like I'm not in a mental state to meet someone there, I won't do it. Really, honestly, I don't even know if that's the question, but there's some weeks that I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to choose my mental health over just trying to get content out there. But I will say, for those weeks that you can push forward past those mental blocks or the exhaustion or whatever the case is, the things that have usually gotten me forward is reaching out just in a phone call to someone that I find important and having a general conversation. Because usually the Lord has a good way of working through those environments and those people specifically in his timing, and they'll say something, a keyword that'll go, okay, I'm back centered. I'm back on track with exactly what I'm trying to do. And then just super encouraged to create again. And so at least for me, that's been a fundamental pivot for me to be able to just okay, outside of this podcast, I'm going to reach out to somebody, or sometimes God just sends them my way, and then it just re-encourages me to be there every single week. But first and foremost, don't make your show and or the thing that you're doing a chore. Number one, right? 101, don't make it a chore. Make it something you're actually fundamentally excited to do every single week. All right, we're going to close this thing out. Sorry, this has been long, but I just kind of wanted to answer some backstories about the show and myself. And question 20, where do I want to go from here? I want every conversation to be an opportunity to share the amazing love and grace of God, of Jesus, to everyone that might see this show. Unabashedly, unashamed. You're going to hear prayers in the show. It might be in the middle of the show, beginning of the show, end of the show. If you don't make it, it is what it is. It's not necessarily for you, it's for us. And that's what's important, is that we are leading in the value of what this thing is. And so where I wanted to go is I wanted to hopefully dig deep and impact the people that are watching it in such a way that they feel themselves either interested in that relationship with God or deepened in their relationship with God, and that they can see from someone else's purview and perspective that it's not always perfect, and it's very challenging, and it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to cry sometimes, and it's okay if you can't cry, and it's okay if you're having a really difficult time, and it's also okay if you're doing really well too. We have a problem in this society where people don't feel comfortable doing okay. They have to have something wrong, because if you do okay and you're doing all right and God's blessing you, then must be nice type of deal. It's okay for you to be doing well. It's such an encouragement. And so I just want people to walk away from this show in the future feeling a sense of some sort of connection with what we're saying, versus, well, they just looked up what the trending topic is. You know what I mean? Right now, first it was Carmelo Anthony and all this different stuff. And there's been just a lot of life life lost and bad situations. But it's when it snows outside and you jump on Facebook, 30 people are reminding you that it's snowing while you're looking at the snow. Why? You know what I mean? So this show's never going to be, I'm just going to tell you, I don't exactly know what it's going to be, but I can tell you it's never going to be about re-vomiting the stuff that people are already vomiting out on the internet. It's just not a part of what we're interested in or what we see value in. I'm just going to skip to this closing question. And I appreciate you guys for watching if you watched to this point. Question 22, if this all ended tomorrow, would it have been worth it? Yes, changed my life. First and foremost, the life has been changed that I set out to change. It's been my own. I'm better at speaking. I'm better at understanding. I'm better at listening. I'm better at knowing how I don't do well in communicating. And I could be better. I do a lot of likes. I get a lot of comments about that. You're going to say like 15 times. It's my personality. There's some things like that are easier to change than others. The whole point is like I changed my life. I changed my trajectory. I've changed my perception, changed my heart posture and my posture in general through this show. And so the rest of it, if you follow the show, if we get to 10,000, 1 million, whatever the case is, like that's all cake, but realistically, like it's already succeeded. I've seen my wife flourish through it. I've seen my friends flourish through it. I've seen the connections flourish through it. I've experienced myself getting closer to God through it. I've experienced potentially losing this thing already because of it and posturing myself poorly. And so not that the podcast is the end all be all, but if it ended tomorrow, I've even told Michael, we have an understanding between the two of us. And this is important, especially if you're going to do anything with somebody you call a friend. We meet up once or twice a month to go get cigars, and we have conversations, whether it's around AI and automations and how to make this thing work better, or if it's about personal things and like things that we're going through. Even if we're like upset with each other, like we like meet up in person to see each other face to face and eye to eye to have those conversations and be intentional in the environment together. And it's been super healthy. The whole point is we always sit across from each other and go, and it's a commitment we've made to each other. If this thing gets in between what we've got and what God's doing in our relationship together, and it has a couple times, but not to that extent. But if it got to a point where it was like one or the other, we'd kill the podcast, because the podcast was never about that. The podcast was never about how popular we were. The podcast was never about building the best community around us that pays a whole bunch of money. And then at the end of the day, you're getting raced up on shoulders and you leave the person behind, that was right there with you behind. It's never been about that, and it's never going to be about that. And so if it even starts to feel that way, if I feel that my life is impacted, whether or not I'm attached to the decision-making of this thing, I'm out, because that's not who I am. I've been that way, and it's a shadow, and I don't want that shadow. And I encourage you, if you're building something, I've built apps or helped build apps in the background in the past that I'm no longer a part of. It was hard to rebrand from the days in podcasts because I felt like I built that when God built that. You know what I mean? And so I encourage you, if you're building something, whether it's with a friend or not with a friend, that is not your identity. What you're building is not your identity. And if you start to feel like it is making you or impacting the decisions you're making or influencing the decisions that you're making negatively, and or like it is your identity, sever that as quickly as possible. It doesn't mean shut it all down. It means take a step back, reevaluate what you're trying to do, and then have those healthy conversations that lays it all out and goes, hey, to whoever you're with and whoever's helping you to do this thing, listen, it's not more important than you and I. It's not more important than, the connection that we're having here. And so that's what I'd answer for that. And I think that's our final question. And I appreciate you if you've listened up to this point. I thought this was going to kind of be a shorter episode, but apparently I'm long-winded, and surprise, surprise. But I appreciate all the support and all the love of those who have followed us since day one. I appreciate the comments and the shares, even some of the negative comments, you know what I mean? I appreciate you for just showing love in whatever way you think love should be shared. And I hope that you continue to watch us and support us. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. That'd be incredible, just so you can keep up with those episodes coming up in the future. And then if you have comments or questions, my email is always on every one of these episodes in the about info on the YouTube. And you can hit pretty much any one of our social medias and our bio sites attached to that. So if you want to reach out to me directly via email, if you just want to leave a comment, if you have questions, we'll take it all. So we appreciate you guys. And hopefully you enjoy this episode and the origin story of Unscriptd Podcast. Till next time.